speaking of Orlando, they've been on a tear, and I wanted to talk about them. They've won 7 of their last 8. Is it sustainable? They've done it without Jalen Suggs, without Wendell Carter Jr. Chumo Okeke is injured. Also, so is who else are they missing right now? Markelle Fultz has been back for a while, and that's been a big. We have to get into that. Like, I feel like him managing the game for them when you go back and watch has been huge. Oh, Gary Harris and the hamstring, and then of course Jonathan Isaac. That was the name that I was misremembering there. I'm not perturbed by any of this happening without Jalen Suggs. I just want to see him be able to play healthy with a full strength Orlando backcourt. Because I think that if you have Fultz, or if you even have Cole Anthony playing the way he is, in addition to Paolo and Franz, it really helps streamline the game for him. And we just haven't seen enough of long stretches with that. So I don't think he comes. Maybe he disrupts some of what's happening. Orlando is 7th in offense and 7th in defense during this time. They're not doing necessarily anything too spectacular on offense. They're doing a good job on the offensive glass. They're getting to the foul line a ton. Not appreciated enough part of Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner's game, quite frankly. You look at both of them, but especially Paolo, the 0-step speed, where from any angle, back to the basket, left side, strong side, basically, doesn't need to be above the break to even get that head of steam, is really like, he can just get by guys, and he is such a physical force around the basket. It's just been a joy to watch, and he's the clear rookie of the year front runner. There are impact metrics that actually like Walker Kessler better. It's Paolo, and it's just not even close this year. He's been on fire during this stretch. 22 points, shooting 42.1% from 3 on nearly 5 attempts per game. Still making some issues with ball control as a passer, but he's going to be just, I would say, an A- passer at his peak, at minimum, is just sort of where I'm at with him. He, like Franz Wagner last year, has been better defensively than I thought. Orlando's rim defense during this stretch and for the season has been wonky. But I've actually liked like some of the help or the contests around the basket that we've seen from Franz and Paolo Banchero specifically. And you're looking at beyond those two, Orlando seems to have found something with Cole Anthony off the bench. It's just during this stretch, but he has been, and for more of the season, he's just been a steadying force off the bench, and not just as a scorer. He has an effective field goal percentage of 63 plus on his off the dribble jumpers over the last 8 games. That's huge, but he's also been like this really good driver. I'm not talking just as a scorer. He's shooting 60% on his drives over the last 8 games, but he's also has an assist rate of 17. He has wreaked havoc and been able to capitalize on it when he's journeying inside the arc. And you look at all the players during this stretch who have finished 50 drives, the only other players to have an assist rate as high, Mike Conley, Russell Westbrook, and LeBron. And yes, that's a compliment with Russ being in there, given the way that he's played off the bench for LA. If that's something new, that's not new, but if that's a level they've tapped into with Cole Anthony, who's always seemed like a natural fit off the bench, that is huge for them. Also huge, we're just going to throw Kevon Harris on these really tough defensive covers, and he's going to hit some of his threes too while he's on the court. Or we have Admiral Schofield. Like he's not really supposed to be playing, but he's going to come. He's hit some of his threes, and he's been good on the glass for them. Also huge, Bol. Not been great defensively, and that I think has a lot to do with just his body frame, but his offensive archetype is formless in the best possible way. Going through sort of a slump with his three-pointer, but that's another guy that they have who just really levels up their depth and the way that they're able to attack on offense. Even Mo Bamba has had some good minutes during these stretches. His straight up rim protection numbers have been fine, which is good. But again, Orlando's rim defense is just so wild. I think some of it is they're fouling more often too, which hasn't helped them. So when guys are getting to the basket, it feels like they are overreacting. But having Mo Bamba, that's like, you are all of a sudden just absolutely stacked in the front court. And this is, they are good in a way where right now, where it makes me feel like, have they tapped into something? Seeing Markelle Fultz being able to manage the game for them. Once they're at full strength with Suggs and Wendell Carter Jr., forget Gary Harris and Jonathan Isaac, have they tapped into something that might get them to the play-in tournament now? Or even the playoffs, but the play-in tournament. I mean, it's not, they have one of the worst records in the East as I'm recording this. They are, I think, in third to last in the East. That doesn't really mean anything right now. They are only 3 losses back of the play-in. And so you look at Washington, Chicago, Toronto, Atlanta, Indiana, teams in front of them. Those are all squads that I think have pullback potential, whether it's by design or if it's Washington, Chicago, and maybe even Toronto a little bit, waiting for them to implode. I don't know the answer to that. And I would refrain from, we have a couple Magic questions I want to get to. I would refrain from going buy high right now. I would look at the Trae Young situation for sure over the offseason. But could you do something medium sized here? If you were able to get a Gary Trent Jr. out of Toronto, but like Mo Bamba, and if Gary Harris was healthy, or Mo Bamba and Chumo Okeke for Gary Trent Jr., which you're going to have cap space, and maybe you don't want him with him headed towards free agency. Would you consider it? That's someone that I think could really help juice up their machine there. Illuminacho asked, if you were the Magic, would you look to trade Mo Bamba before the deadline, considering there could be a fire sale of teams racing to the bottom? What would be a reasonable haul for him in Orlando's position? I don't know. I mean, like the one I just sort of outlined is, could you get that from Toronto? I don't think you're getting a first round pick for him, but as someone who in theory gives you, let's say stand still, straight up rim protection, plus some floor spacing, I think that would be valuable to some teams. Could Charlotte talk themselves into giving up something for him? I do think a lot of teams might be interested in him as a backup if you were to get into the, you're not going to get anything major from Boston or even Sacramento, who kind of use a different look at the big man spot. San Antonio, they're just not going to give up a ton of value for him. So I don't know what the value is, but I think you're looking to get a rotation player in exchange for him, and then maybe a good second or two good rotation players, or just someone who's Gary Trent Jr., I'd say, is on the higher end of the rotation player spectrum there. And so is that someone that you could look at? The Pelicans, I don't really think they have anyone that's going to interest Orlando. I think you target someone who's going to be part of your rotation, just because you can't expect the first round pick would be my gut. And if not, if you can't get that, or if you can't put him into a package that gets you that, you wait until the summer, guarantee a salary. Maybe you use him as an interesting salary matching tool. But I think you could make the case, look at it, because you have, when Wendell Carter Jr. is healthy, him, Paolo Banchero, Bol now. But Jonathan Isaac's not healthy. I don't know if this logjam is as crowded as we make it out to be, or some of the national media make it out to be. It can work with Mo Bamba just being there. And they've gotten good minutes out of, that new starting lineup that has the Wagners and Bol and Paolo in it. It's a -3, I think, over this stretch in total. That's good for me when you're going up against opposing starting units. That's actually a big deal, in my opinion. So being able to have the starters hold their own, and the way that this team has set itself up on defense, where no, they're not perfect, but they're getting back, and you can see really the effort there. And you're looking at the pressure that they are putting on opposing offenses, to where they're forcing them to go through multiple options and explore different levels of the shot clock when they're taking those opportunities. I think that really has helped out their defensive returns. They've gotten lucky on opponent 3-point shooting. Of course, during the stretch, opponents are under 32%, but I think there's a foundation here. And I would finish it up like this. Orlando could be like a small buyer at the trade deadline, but that's not how I want to frame this. It's, if I had to say that can Orlando be better than two of Chicago, Toronto, Washington? And if you want to throw Atlanta, Indiana in there, I think yes. And that's like kind of widening the field. But I think this season, there's a chance the Magic end up being better than the Washington and Chicago specifically. And not just because those teams might tear it down. And if you can get into the play-in and the returns are encouraging, you look over the offseason if Trae Young's available. You look at, well, can we upgrade this roster? You're kind of like the Cavs then of last season, not quite as good maybe by record alone, but your outlook. You have guys in place who are young but ready to go now, and you have assets to burn. If someone like Trae Young becomes available, who profiles as a filthy fit, you go after it. That's how good the Magic are. And we all knew, I think collectively, especially if we listen to this podcast, that their future was bright, but it feels like the swiftness with which they actually might arrive is going to be even faster than we could have projected here after this stretch. I don't want to read too much into the 8 games. We need to see how they reincorporate Suggs and Wendell Carter Jr. and all this, but I find those guys as two useful players, Wendell Carter Jr. more immediately. And if they come in and disrupt it, like, you can look at moving them if you need to shake up the front court for real. Wendell Carter Jr. is going to have a lot of trade value. I just don't think you need to move him. I think Suggs is going to be really good and will actually be a great fit for this team. Just plug him into the starting 5 when he's back. I want to see him with Fultz and Paolo and Franz more. And I want to see him, can you run some bench units with him and Cole Anthony together? This team has found something within itself, in addition to depth. Like, getting good minutes from Mo Wagner. Do you expect that to continue? How much is Kevon Harris really going to play? Same with Schofield. But to have those depth pieces on your team is monstrous, and it opens different avenues for you. And so I'll close it up just by reiterating, I'm just going to predict that they will be better than 2 of the Bulls, Wizards, Hawks, Raptors, or Pacers this season. That doesn't guarantee them a play-in spot, but I think that we have yet to see where they're going to peak in the standings this year. And if they design a controlled demolition because someone gets injured or they decide they want to jack up their own lottery odds, okay, fine. But that's where I'm at with the Magic, because I think there is something here that they're going to continue to build upon throughout the season. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Not as long as the first attempt I recorded. I shortchanged the Trae Young discussion a little bit and the Magic discussion. Hope you stuck with me. Anyway, please remember to subscribe wherever you're consuming us. Tell people about us. Help us to continue build this community. And until next time, I leave it to shout out to one, the only, the legendary, my heartbeat, Frank Ntilikina.